Can a human being challenge the fiercest oceans on Earth aboard nothing more than a few logs tied together with ropes? In 1947, a young Norwegian explorer named Thor Heyerdahl stood before academics and anthropologists with a seemingly outrageous theory: that the ancient people of South America had settled the remote islands of Polynesia. The scientific community dismissed his idea. They argued that it was impossible. Ancient people, they said, had no proper ships, only primitive rafts that would fall apart and sink within days in the vast Pacific Ocean. But Thor refused to back down. Instead, he chose the most dangerous way possible to prove his theory. He would build the raft himself. Then he would sail across the Pacific with 5 other daring men, placing their lives entirely in the hands of the ocean currents. What followed would become one of the most extraordinary survival journeys in human history. The challenge began in the rainforests of Ecuador. Thor insisted that not a single modern material be used. No nails, no steel wires, no nylon ropes. The team cut down 9 enormous balsa logs, a legendary wood known for its remarkable lightness. Using nothing but natural hemp ropes to bind the logs together, the Kon-Tiki raft slowly began to take shape, named after the ancient Inca sun god. At the center of the raft, they built a small bamboo hut for shelter and raised a simple square sail. Thor carefully selected his crew, 5 men and a parrot. There was a navigator who could read the stars, a sociologist, an engineer, and 2 radio operators who were veterans of World War II. None of them were professional sailors. In fact, Thor himself was terrified of water and couldn't even swim.
On the 28th of April, 1947, the primitive raft set sail amid the cheers and farewells of a crowd, many of whom believed they were watching men embark on a one-way journey to their graves. During the first few days, excitement quickly turned into genuine fear. Towering waves battered the raft relentlessly, while the wooden logs began absorbing water and producing eerie creaking sounds throughout the night. The crew feared that the ropes would snap at any moment and that the logs would break apart and drift away. Aboard the Kon-Tiki, the ocean gradually transformed from an enemy into a home. The crew didn't even need fishing boats. Flying fish would literally leap onto the raft at night and land inside the bamboo hut, only to become breakfast the next morning. To maintain their health, they mixed seawater with fresh water to replenish essential salts. But life in isolation was far from peaceful. The raft was constantly surrounded by the fins of sharks cruising through the water. One night, the crew experienced a truly breathtaking moment when a gigantic whale shark emerged from the depths. The largest fish on Earth slowly circled their fragile raft for hours. A single powerful movement from the massive creature could have shattered the raft and ended the expedition instantly. But the giant peacefully disappeared back into the ocean. Thanks to their primitive radio equipment, the 2 radio operators managed to establish contact with amateur radio enthusiasts across the world. Soon, people everywhere were eagerly following updates from the tiny raft drifting alone in the vast Pacific Ocean. After 101 days at sea, and more than 7,000 kilometers across the heart of the unknown, land finally appeared. The islands of Polynesia were now right before their eyes. But their joy suddenly turned into a nightmare. The islands were protected by a deadly ring of razor-sharp coral reefs, and the primitive raft had no ability to maneuver or change direction. The powerful ocean current drove them relentlessly toward the coral barrier like a ship headed for an executioner's blade. Then a mountain-sized wave rose from the sea. It lifted the Kon-Tiki high into the air and hurled it violently onto the coral rocks. The bamboo hut was smashed. The sail was torn apart. The rope snapped and flew through the air. For a terrifying moment, everyone believed it was the end. But the 9 giant balsa logs absorbed the tremendous impact and protected the crew from certain death. The raging waves threw them onto the shore. Exhausted. Injured. Barely able to move. They crawled across the sand, but they were alive.
The islanders welcomed them like heroes who had descended from the heavens. Thor Heyerdahl and his crew had done the impossible. They proved to the world and to the scientists who had mocked them that ancient people possessed both the technology and the courage needed to cross vast oceans. After returning to Norway, Thor wrote a book about the expedition. It was translated into 67 languages and sold millions of copies worldwide. The documentary film they recorded aboard the raft using a primitive camera went on to win the Academy Award for Best Documentary Feature in 1951.